We have just arrived at gym for a Sunday session. Vicky has come along with me. Today's not going to be a long one. It's meant to be 38 degrees today. Today I thought I would talk about my worst injuries in the last 2 years of planche training. So my first injury was overuse. This was a pain in my shoulder while going through one of my first planche programs that eventually led to the current programming I'm doing now. And it was a pain in the shoulder from very high intensity and just pushing through it. I looked at my programming as linear progression and I ignored any of the pain that came along with that. And that niggle of a shoulder pain turned into a long-term, I'm talking several months plus. And that was all because I ignored the pain and pushed through. Overtraining is something that a lot of you can be aware of. But I also think there is a caveat that it does take experience. It won't quite sink in, it won't anywhere near sink in as much as going through it yourself. Part of it is a learning experience because the feeling teaches so much more than my words could ever convey. The more you understand what pain means to your body, and this isn't meant to make out as simple. It's simple if you're like me, differentiating between DOMs and injury, but sometimes even the pain within that can be hard to determine whether it's just today that you're sore or whether this is a sign of something that you need to slow down on. So I would just always push towards any pain means back off for that day. Of course there are exceptions to that, whether it's a competition or a big moment, but even then I'm just allowing the weight of the moment to matter more, but it still doesn't mean you're less at risk of injury if you're choosing to go through pain rather than back away. I want to be able to move and train for my whole life. So big injuries are something that will take away from that. So I'm going to use this gym ball to help lean into my planche. And to me, it's going to be good because it's not very supportive. So it will give me a little bit more honest of a lean. Whereas I can use the friction of a bench or a block to support a lean a little bit, maybe further, maybe not as far. But Picky's taken a liking to the ball, so he's attacking it while I use it, which is inconvenient and also hilarious. I'm going to allow it. The second injury I had was a complete accident. Someone was up in a shoulder stand on the rings. They over-rotated. My arm was up above, internally rotated up on their legs, and it got pushed over as they went over. I was trying to take some of the weight off of it so the fall wasn't as big of an impact, and my shoulder just went crinkle, crinkle, crunch. And I immediately knew I'd done something bad. That put me out for several months, 6 months. None of it could really be avoided in that circumstance unless you say, well, don't spot them, don't put your arm that way. But that's more just a hindsight's 20/20. So basically saying accidents can happen. If you find yourself having had an accident and unable to do the training that you wish to do, then the approach back is obviously first see a physio, know what you're working with to return, figuring out what version of that move you can do. And don't marry yourself to anything. Don't have an ego with any of it. A planche position could be all the way back to just a front support, top of a push-up, no load. You just need to find something you can do that allows you to start to get the ball rolling with that movement, and that will eventually be the stepping stones to returning back to your training. You cannot say that don't get depressed when you get injured, don't get upset, because you definitely will. Injuries suck, especially for people that love to train like me, and like I think many of you, but they will inevitably happen. There's a time to be upset for it, but to be pragmatic, to find out what is the quickest way to get back. I've heard that 1 or 2, max a 3 out of 10 pain can be okay, so long as you feel okay the next day afterwards. It hasn't made anything worse. Pain does not have to be obsolete from your training sessions, but you got to be mindful about it, and there'll probably be a bit of trial and error. So that was how I got back to planche training after that accident on my shoulder. The third one was after I had a 2-week trip to Japan. That was just a complete holiday. I didn't train at all, and then I came back and I just did some what I thought was light stuff, a little bit different to what I would do with planche. and hurt myself. And I somewhat blame the fact that I just didn't do any kind of active rest, meaning anything that replicated planche in my time off. And that is where this third lesson comes from, is I actually do advocate for active rest. I know I've read plenty of memes and plenty of criticism against active rest from the sense of you train and then you recover. So active rest is just more training that hampers your recovery. But we're not looking at it like that. That's a different form of context. I'm talking about if I go on holiday, going complete cold turkey from movements that I'm very serious about makes it that when I come back, there's some rust, and no matter how experienced you are, there can be some trial and error figuring out how rusty you've got, and there can be mistakes made within that process returning back to training in terms of overloading it too much and leave you open to injury. So I think just always keep the wheels greased, so to speak. And I should have been doing, even in my trip when I was in Japan, just some front support, downward dog, leaning into planche, pressing back, leaning back in, some push-ups. Nothing that takes away from my time off, but just movement that takes anywhere from 10 minutes to 30 minutes each day would be more than enough and would not detract in the slightest from my time off of training and work, and it would have helped arm me a little bit better returning back to training. If injury is still something on your mind, check out the video before this one on some things I do to help alleviate the shoulder injury that's already there.